Hi there, and welcome on the journey to transform culture. I'm Steve, and I'll be your guide. Well, folks, I hope you're having a fantastic day and an even better week. I think I've just about licked this cold chest thing, whatever it is. So my videos, when they air, will be slightly out of order because I've been behind the curve on posting the ones that I had done kind of intermittently prior to that. In the midst of that, tried to get a couple off there. And then this one on the tail end. So they may not be perfect order, but that's okay. Most of my stuff is topical anyway. So if you're not following in order, perfectly fine, which actually leads, public service announcement. Even the book, folks, if you go down to the down into the description area, you'll see where there's access to to order book if you want. You can get it through Audible or not Audible, but Kindle and so on. But keep in mind, if you go down that route, that the first three chapters after that, boom, you can go in any order pretty much. It's designed to be a help. Okay. And keep in mind too, folks, just to reiterate, the journey to transform culture, that that title itself may seem a little bit like a really broad, like, what are we doing? Are we overhauling culture? Really, folks, it's about improving culture, right? My background is in organizational improvement. Retired Air Force and got, started doing some projects with them right before I finished out, and then took that into the civilian world, into many different areas, and had, I guess you could say, my secret sauce has been able to very, very efficiently go in and help organizations improve. So, that said, one of the reasons that I began posting these YouTube videos was to kind of make some topical conversations, whether they be lunch and learns, although some of my videos are a little bit longer, and you can do them in short order, and you can hear, I'm in Studio B, so if you hear dogs barking in the background, that's why. But I made the videos so that they were accessible for folks, so that you could see a topic, see something that catches your attention, and you can use that, pull in any nuggets of experience, wisdom, any of it, and apply it to help improve your organization. Now, all that being said, to also reiterate, even though we talk about organizational culture, right? Organizations, really, why is that? It's because that's where we most often come together, what? As individuals, to become a team. Now, that isn't exclusive. Obviously, we can do this in our civic organizations, our churches, our friend circles, our family, all the things, the clubs and activity, all the things that exist in culture, right? So, what does that mean? It means all the dots connect, folks. There isn't really you may think there's a veil between much of these, and try as we might to separate those, it doesn't really work. And so rather than lean away from that, lean into it and understand that any wisdom you get during professionally is valuable to you personally, and vice versa. So with that understanding, let's kick it off. What is this video going to be about, Steve? Well, this video is essentially talking about behavior and how it affects our experience, right? And this may be pretty easy, right? You might think, well, we could talk about this in about 5 minutes and be done. Sure, we could. But we're going to talk about some aspects, right? Just perspectives. And then from that and your own experiences, but I'm also going to pull in things that are common to most people relative to the topic. And so behavior and how it affects experience, but also the converse of that, right? So if you think about it, if you're a customer and you go into a restaurant, right? It could be, whether you do the sports pub thing, or, whether you go do restaurants, whatever, the environment. Typically, you got somewhat dressed up, you cleaned up, right? And you're gonna go out to eat. Okay, great. And you may have been in a certain way, right? a certain mode. You may be in a grouchy mode, who knows, or an okay mode, right? But you go in, and what happens? You go into a new environment, right? And that energy of that new environment, people enjoying their meals and conversations and laughter and all of the things, right? There's a synergy that's already present when you walked in, right? And that creates an energy level. And that is essentially what they're experiencing the restaurant. They're in the midst of experiencing that, right? But you just walked in, right? You're not there yet, right? You haven't sat down, you haven't got, seated in the whole thing. Maybe you're waiting on friends to show up, whatever. But you haven't engaged. You haven't gotten to that place yet, but it's going on, right? Your energy, right? Your behavior, your thought processes, everything were a particular way prior to the showing up. And then once your friends showed up and you sat down, start joking around, talking to each other, getting caught up, all the things, and the synergy between your group starts to build. Next thing you know, you might have a little spillover energy with other folks who are already there, maybe somebody that you know across the way. Oh, hey, how's it going? It's good to see you out. Whatever, right? But our experience is shaped by what? Behavior. And do you see how your behavior shifted? Your behavior, and we've all been here. It doesn't really matter. I could have just easily have said, you're a particular way. You get up before you go to church, and then when you get to church, same thing, right? The energy, synergy, all the things, right? And then a shared experience, right? So it doesn't really matter what venue we're talking about. What really matters is to understand that our behavior is so influenced by what's going on, right? So much so that we have to kind of ask ourselves, it's not the chicken or the egg necessarily, but it is kind of both, right? It's not what, that whole thing, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Well, the answer is both, right? So, I'm just going to let Schrodinger's cat out and put the chicken in there instead. But you understand that there is a difference. You were in a particular mode. You went and engaged. The synergy began, and boom, your behavior now has been influenced by the experience, right? And we all know this. Now, it isn't really a far cry to see how this plays out in your organizations. Some folks really enjoy the people they work with, but they could care less about where they work and what they actually do. Like, maybe they don't care about the product, but they really like the team and they just have a great synergy, right? And they endure through all the silliness because they really bond with the team. And then the converse can also be true as well, right? But why is that? Think of our behavior. Now, I'll use the restaurant scenario, right? Let's stick with that. Now, let's say everybody's having a good time, doing their own little, all the little groups of visiting and having a good time, whatever, fun, all the things. Maybe there's a little light, band playing in the background, whatever, it depends on the time of year, maybe it's a patio thing too, a spillover situation, who knows. But now, enter one person with bad behavior, right? And I don't mean like they're just kind of neutral and, to themselves. And, everybody has a bad day, right? It might just take some longer than others, right? Some people go through that whole experience and then finally kind of relax and engage because maybe they're struggling. That transformative period takes a little longer with some than others. That's fine. We all have our own gear ratio, right? But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about somebody walks in with a piercing bad attitude, right? They start maybe ridiculing the server, and they start, being very difficult, right? And then rude, and then escalating, being loud in the negative sense, right? In that way. What do you think? We've all, at some point in our lives, have experienced this in one venue or another. What happens to the energy in the room? Oh, right? And then what can also happen is because we may be irritated that somebody came in who's being, we'll say, grumpy, whatever you want to call it, right? Angry bird, whatever you want to call it. Because we can actually become irritated. And then what you start to see is a little bit of a domino effect, so that the energy isn't just because, right? It's because we tend to rise to meet that energy where it is, or down to where it is, right? I guess in that sense. But we tend to, right? Because they're not being, they're being rude, they're being all these things, and it may be inappropriate, whatever, right? And all these things. And so there's a certain part of us that, we like to laugh, have fun, things. When everybody's playing by the same rules, we can laugh and enjoy ourselves and ha 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 and have a good time. But when someone is not, it's not that somebody's not having a good time, it's now somebody who's actually contrary to all of that. And then what you see is then everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people, right? A lot of everybody's will then begin to be irritated as well. And that's when you start to see the energy drop. Now, why do I talk about it like this? Because I have seen this in organizations, folks. I've seen it to such a level when I've gone to assess an organization where certain people in the organization show up for work, and the energy or come into I'll say a larger meeting room, if you will. You'll say 20 to 30 people. The energy will shift and start to dip. Now, it may not plummet. It's not like it's, people start, throwing chairs, but it is, you can feel the temperature drop in the room, right? And it may have happened that I was, preparing to do seminars, and I like to have fun. And so in the lead up, I'm talking to folks and engaging and everything. And for the most part, people, they don't know that, people are fairly neutral initially, but then it gets talking, visiting, all the things. And then energy starts to pick up, right? Same way. But you can tell when certain people come into the room, it is, whoa, right? And why is that? Because those people were like the first example, the one with who was rude or whatever it was, right? Some version of that, right? At some point in the past in the organization. So you might be saying, okay, Steve, what are you trying to tell us? Well, behavior affects our experience. And very consciously, I should say subconsciously, if you're not aware of that when you're going to a meeting or going to a function or an event or insert whatever here, where a team or a group of people show up, if you are not aware and don't have self-awareness about your behavior, then what? Then that dip is going to occur, especially if you happen to be the one. You may not even be like the belligerent worst case scenario. It may be you're just low enough, just below neutral enough over a long period of time that ends up having an impact. Now, multiply it, because this has exponential effect, right? So if we're talking about 50 people and you got 10 people who are in this, right? Then that creates this low, ebb of energy and engagement and attention and focus, quite honestly. So if we're talking literally, we can talk about it literally affecting productivity, literally affecting quality and the cohesion of the team, right? Now, if this is a leader, obviously problematic. If it's team members, no less problematic, but in different ways, right? So our behavior absolutely affects experience. The challenge here, though, is that you do have a certain group. I don't know the numbers intuitively. I don't know. If we're going to use the 80-20 rule, we'll say it's the middle 20. I don't know what it is. It could be the middle 40, whatever. But there is a group who is what? They're affected by both. They're affected very easily by that low energy, and they're affected very easily by the high engaging, hey, let's focus, let's get things done. Hey, how's everybody doing? Everybody trying to bring their best game, right? To bear on what you're doing, their best, best performances, all the things, right? Attention, focus could just be simple as that. but they're so affected by the temperature in the room that even if it's just a few, like when I use the 10 or 8 to 10, whatever it is, that 8 to 10 now exponentially becomes kind of a domino effect through potentially an organization. Now, when you look at your performance, your key performance indicators, you start to see where performance, and you might say, oh, geez, we can't figure out why. And it's so easy for us as human beings to think, well, it couldn't be something as simple as behavior. Oh, yeah, it could. Right? Why is that? Well, behavior, if your mind isn't in the right place, you're not thinking, you're not focused on what you're doing. Maybe your behavior is affected by what happened at home or on the road to work, whatever it is, whatever thing interrupted your normal, thought processes and whatever. And then you don't, pre-start a machine. I mean, I could never encapsulate all the examples, too many people in the world, but you don't pre-start or inspect something, right? And then it ends up ruining something else, right? You don't communicate something, and then that affects service to a customer. You don't do a thing, or you forget a step, or you do this stuff, folks. Our behavior absolutely is tied directly into the results. And oftentimes what happens is organizations, yeah, this machine keeps whatever, you get into it for a while, and not in every case, of course, but in a lot of cases, folks, it's the human being that was behind the machine, or at some stage dealing with the machine. Oh, we never did the self-test, or we never did, put the fluids in the the oil, the blah, 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 whatever, right? And that becomes the problem, right? It wasn't the vehicle that failed. It was the person who operated the vehicle that failed, right? That sort of thing. So, so you have to look at our behavior, right? And behavior isn't just like, oh, am I happy? Am I sad? Am I mad? No, I mean, obviously your emotional behaviors and that sort of thing are absolutely paramount to all of this. But it's also, do you put your behavior in the appropriate context of where you are in the present moment, right? So if your behavior is reflective of something that happened 2 weeks ago, or something that you're not sure about is going to happen 2 days from now, you're not in the present, right? So again, it's affecting your experience, your behavior. Your behavior could be looking too far forward, dwelling too much in the past, not letting things go. Well, I had an argument with so-and-so about a week ago. We never got along since. So now every time you see this person, now your mind is shifting off into other things that may not even be a problem. This person may not even have a clue that you're irritated with them, whatever, right? Hypothetical, clearly. But who hasn't seen this? And so then mistakes get made, and it's like, oh well, it was the flux capacitor that failed, and but then when you never, these are the difficult things to drill into. And why is that? You can't drill into somebody's mind and figure out what they were thinking and feeling, because a lot of times people aren't sharing this stuff. Some of this is just happening in the background, right? It's part of our thought loops and so forth, right? So experience. But then again, keep in mind, some folks are just looking for the show. There's some folks who are just there for they're in their brain, they're eating popcorn, enjoying the chaos, okay? So there is the behavior that determines the outcomes and the experience that you're going to have. And what does that mean? The results you get for your customers, right? But there's also those who are what? Engaging only for the experience itself, right? So let me put it this way. They go where they go because they want to be entertained, right? Kind of like the customer going to the restaurant. If you're the customer, that's one thing. But if you're part of the team, you're not there to enjoy the experience. I'm a basketball guy from way back, but you go to a pro game, you buy tickets to a pro game, you waited 3 months, whatever, to see the pairing of the competition you want to watch, and you get those tickets and stuff, and you go, right? Those players on the court, yes, they like the game of basketball, right? They enjoy it. It's also their profession, so it's their work and it's their job. They're not there to enjoy it per se, right? Although there is a satisfaction, right, that they get from it. They're there to what? Get an outcome, get a win. Ultimately, that's what they're doing all this for. But the people in the stands now, we're there for the enjoyment of watching them play, right? We're enjoying them watching them play. That's what your customers, those are your customers. But if your team is showing up like a customer expecting, well, my behavior is not going to change until the environment around here changes, right? That's a customer mindset. And while that isn't a bad thing to have and maybe in the back of your mind, the next thought we need to have is, what should my behavior be to create that environment, right? Well, our conference room is just, it's to this, it's to that. Well, hey, how about offering yourself up to help do this, with 3 or 4 others and to do a little project, ask your owners or your leadership, hey, it's too dark in here, all these things. Hey, can we chip away and work on some of this, right? And they probably would pay, whatever, a little overtime. Who knows? Figure it out for yourselves. But step up, right? If you want the environment to change, your behavior has to change. Your willingness to help has to change. You can't be like, bring me this and bring me that, when you're a member of a team. No, just like the people playing basketball, the team is on the floor. They're not standing there going, hey, bring me this and bring me that, right? No, they're hustling up and down the floor, right? Getting it done, right? And then when they aren't, we notice, right? When we aren't, they notice. And then when they're playing poorly, we notice. And what do you think happens? What do you see the media oftentimes do? They're like little mini investigators, some of these media. I know they can sometimes be annoying, but hey, they are what they are, right? They got a job to do. So they'll poke and prod and all this stuff. And if there is something going on outside, contract negotiations and all these things, and the player is not focused on the game, and they're not winning, and they're losing by a small margin often, and you got 2 or 3 players, one's got this problem, one's got this, and dealing with these things, blah, blah, blah. These are real life examples, right, that we see oftentimes, but these are also, in their own way, these are very much mirrored by the common workforce too, right? And coaching, and as is the coaching is to site leadership. So when you look at all of that, anytime we're distracted by the noise outside of the environment, then that's going to be problematic. If our expectation is to show up and be served versus to serve the customer's enjoyment of the experience, right? So you've got 2 different experiences going on here, right? But your experience on the floor, just like the player's experience, your experience in your organization, just like the player's experience on the floor, is going to be a positive one when you're doing well, when things are clicking, and and the energy's right, and there's a cohesion, and you're having fun, and we're having, we're having fun when we're doing well. I mean, it's just the bottom line. So anyway, just a little talk today, folks, about behavior and then how it affects your experience, but also to also reflect on, hey, what behavior, are you bringing your best behavior? Are you being on your best behavior? Are you bringing, the behavior that is going to lend itself to the team having an enjoying, and it lends itself to the team enjoying the experience of being a part of that organization. If you do, if you bring that, then you will affect change in the environment, and you will enhance the experience. Don't wait for the experience to change before you step up, right? You be the change, right? We've always heard that. You be the change you want to see. Absolutely, right? But remember, it's a behavior thing first, and then experience changes. All right, folks, hope you're having a fantastic day. Remember to hit that good green domino 3 to 5 times a day or more to uplift, motivate, inspire, just encourage one another. When you do this, not only are you helping to transform culture, but you're transforming your own life. But remember, we can't transform anything on the outside if we're not willing to transform on the inside. That's super important. All right, folks, have a fantastic day. Hit like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, we'll talk to you later.